Thomas Jefferson expressed the Enlightenment's ideal of inalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, of which no law-abiding person should be deprived. Of course, the gap between expression and execution is a long, hard road. The consequences of Jefferson's words stirred a revolution, eventually leading to the constitutional amendments that codified a right to free speech, due process, voting rights, the right to bear arms, equal protection under the law, and many other essential rights that grounds our story as citizens in a free society. These ideas imply the primary right to live without threat from environmental harm, safeguarding access to clean water, clean air, healthy, intact habitats, and a climate free from unchecked anthropogenic disruption. In this conversation with Maya Van Rossem, founder of Green Amendments for the Generations, we'll highlight the growing national awareness that the same legal standard that secures the primacy of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness must also be applied to the material elements that allow us to thrive as free people. As of this recording, 19 states have drafted Green Amendment proposals, and 8 are actively organizing to adopt constitutional Green Amendments. Montana, New York, and Pennsylvania all have Green Amendments in their state constitutions. Citizens in those states enjoy healthier lives, better economic opportunities, and neighborhoods free from industrial intrusion. In a natural environment increasingly under siege, Maya Van Rossem offers an audacious, well-executed, and essential plan for making Green Amendments a reality.
Great. Okay, good.
So how are you doing? How are you holding up in the third day of Trump 2.0?
Well, it's emotionally very stressful and angering and frustrating.
Yeah.
For me, like I think it is for anybody who cares about people in the environment, right? So
right.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It's so what's the update on the Green Amendments? How are things going with that right now, the Green Amendment movement?
Yeah. So the Green Amendment movement is really it truly is sweeping the nation. If you look from coast to coast, including the Hawaiian Islands, we have 19 states where language has been proposed. We have another 8 states where communities are learning and or organizing towards a Green Amendment. And then in the 3 states where we have an amendment, Pennsylvania, Montana, and most recently New York, there are advocacy initiatives as well as, when necessary, legal actions to enforce them and make change. And the recent Held v. Montana case that people have heard so much about, the reason why that case was so incredibly successful was because its legal foundation was the Montana Green Amendment.
I see. So there was a Green Amendment before the Held lawsuit came up?
Yes, it is.
I see.
Yeah, from the inception. The Green Amendment was a core aspect of the legal arguments. There were also some other claims that actually ended up going by the wayside. And so the incredible victory was found, its foundation was in that Green Amendment language.
So that would display the impact of a Green Amendment, how it can create a situation where these kids can have a successful lawsuit.
Yes, and what I really like to make clear to people is that the Held v. Montana is the most recent Green Amendment victory. But the truth is, when we look particularly at Pennsylvania and Montana, where the Green Amendments have been around the longest, we have a series of really effective outcomes, sometimes advocacy outcomes, sometimes litigation outcomes, but demonstrating how the amendment is a powerful tool for addressing climate change, for ensuring cleanup of long ignored toxic sites, for protecting
Mhm.
critical remote ecosystems that the law otherwise was going to subject to devastating harm, including ecosystems outside of Yellowstone National Park, which are environmentally, recreationally, and economically important. The amendments have been used to great effect to protect the quality of water and water supplies. So Held v. Montana really, most recently highlighted how incredibly effective an amendment can be for people who are facing serious environmental challenges, but it is by no means the only example.
Good. So for the folks, can you just kind of give a brief description of what the Green Amendments movement is and are?
Yeah. So a green amendment is a special kind of environmental rights amendment that meets certain essential criteria, and as a result, lift up environmental rights so they are given the same highest constitutional standing as other fundamental freedoms we all know about and we all enjoy, like the right to free speech and freedom of religion, private property rights, for example. The thing that makes a green amendment so impactful is it is carefully crafted language that's placed in the Bill of Rights section of the state constitution. So alongside these other fundamental freedoms, it is very clear that it is protecting the environmental rights of the people, not creating those rights. It's actually respecting the inalienable human rights that people already have by virtue of the fact that they are here on earth. But because of the constitutional language, we are making those inalienable rights now enforceable. The language is self-executing, meaning it has legal strength. Whether or not you can find a law implementing it, people can look to their right to clean water, clean air, a safe climate, and a healthy environment to secure effective legal protections. The amendment applies to all levels of government within the state. So it doesn't just hold the legislature accountable or the governor's office accountable, but local government, county government, state government, all branches of government are responsible for protecting the environmental rights of the people. And the best green amendments are very clear that they also create an obligation on government officials to ensure that they are protecting the state's natural resources for both present and future generations. Oh, and that environmental right that is articulated in the amendment, respected in the amendment, is also generational. Right. So it's not just about protecting those of us who are here today, but there is actually an obligation to protect the rights of future generations and natural resources for the benefit of future generations.
Hence your the name of your foundation, Green Amendment for the Generations.
Green Amendments for the Generations. Right. Exactly. In fact, when I wrote the book, when I first founded the movement, it was called For the Generations. And then I wrote the book and I said, wait a second, there are lots of environmental rights amendments in state constitutions, right? Constitutional amendments that already talk about environmental rights or the importance of protecting the environment, but they haven't really made a difference. A green amendment is a special kind of environmental rights amendment that, again, only exists in 3 states. So I titled the book The Green Amendment, coined and defined the term the Green Amendment, but then I was left with Green Amendment and For the Generations. And I said, hey, it's a perfect pairing that describes my mission, Green Amendments for the Generations.
That's excellent. Yeah. So it seems like what you're describing here is more thorough, I guess would be the word than like piecemeal legislation that that goes for like clean up this river or something like that, just which is a lot more effective. Obviously, it seems that a piecemeal approach, well, that's kind of what we've had so far, and laws can be reversed if it's not part of the constitution of a state. How do you get states? I mean, I assume that some of these states, there's some pushback on this. Well, what kind of pushback do you get, and how do you overcome it?
So you are right. A constitutional entitlement has greater staying power. And once you secure it, you're unlikely to ever lose it. And when you get a green amendment, you are advancing all aspects of environmental protection, water, air, climate, addressing the issues of plastics and toxins, right? And energy creation, everything gets uplifted and benefited at the same time. So it is really very powerful that way. And it is harder to get a constitutional amendment. There is a higher bar than another piece of legislation. But as I explained, while it may be harder to get a constitutional green amendment passed, once you secure it, you're unlikely to ever lose it, because who's going to vote to give away their right to clean water and clean air?
Right.
So, it's very beneficial that we do, but it is a higher bar. And there are challenges. And believe it or not, and people are often shocked, we do have opposition. We do have industry leaders who boldly come forth and suggest that protecting the right of the people to clean water and clean air is somehow unjustified. They even use one of the biggest arguments emerging in pushback to green amendments is securing a green amendment or pursuing a green amendment is undemocratic. Like, the people using the process, their constitutional amendment process to amend their constitution, the constitution that belongs to we the people, is undemocratic, is the most ridiculous assertion that, one can make. But yet, those are the kinds of arguments we hear. We hear that the amendments are going to result in a massive onslaught of litigation, which is simply not true. If that did happen, it would mean a state was really facing some very serious problems, and it's a good thing they had an amendment. Or they say the language is too broad. What is clean water? What is clean air? To which I respond, language in constitutional Bill of Rights provisions is always broad. What is free speech? What is an unreasonable search or seizure? These broad terms, the language is broad by design. So we can, as you said, Tom, cover all aspects of environmental protection. And the terms get defined in a green amendment the same way they get defined in other constitutional provisions, through the democratic process that includes legislation and regulation and permitting, and when necessary, the courts. So we do have challenges, but we have great answers for all of them. And fundamentally, when we look at who is challenging, it is people who are benefiting from environmental pollution, degradation, and harm, which is, a sad state of affairs.
It is a sad state of affairs that companies, even now in 2025, are trying to the clean water and clean air. I work a lot with climate change, and get a lot of pushback on that. But you can always kind of find some common ground when you talk about clean water and clean air, and even the climate change deniers will go, yeah, I want clean water and clean air. Everybody wants that. And so for a corporation to come in and say, what is clean water? In terms of that, I mean, we have, at the federal level, there's the Clean Water Act, right? So doesn't that sort of define it in a sense for?
Well, it defines it to a certain degree in certain contexts. Right. And that really, there's a lot of legislation out there at the federal level and at the state level. When it comes to clean water, yes, we have the Clean Water Act, but we also have, the Toxic Substances Control Act, right, which focuses on toxic aspects. We have the Safe Drinking Water Act. We have a variety of laws that are focused on different aspects of protecting the water and the environment. But all of them, as you began, Tom, are piecemeal. They address a segment of the problem. And we still have lots of areas of pollution and degradation that are not addressed, or are legalized either through the permitting process that those laws are fundamentally focused on, actually giving permits that allow industries to pollute, or there are big loopholes that are intentionally written into the law or accidentally get in there. Or there are, fundamental aspects of the environment that were not and could not have been anticipated when that law was written. For example, forever chemicals, right? That man-made family of chemicals known as PFAS that is devastating water supplies, environments, and human health across the nation and around the world. PFAS was allowed to proliferate because there were no laws at the state level or the federal level to address that. But had there been green amendments, enforceable, meaningful green amendments in place, then when the use of PFAS emerged, when the science came forth and said this is really problematic, then we, the people in states across the nation, and if we had a federal green amendment, which hopefully we will get as well, we could have turned to our right to clean water and a healthy environment, to ensure that our government officials address that problem before it devastated so many lives, right? So inherently, our environmental protection system is focused on legalizing pollution and filled with gaps and loopholes, accidental or otherwise. And the truth is, you can't anticipate and imagine every single future circumstance or every specific environmental condition. There are some places and spaces where, when you read the law or you read the regulation, yes, that industrial operation can be located in that place and spew that much pollution into the air. But when you look at what the Native American community next door, or the Black or brown communities next door are already being exposed to in terms of air contamination, in terms of neurotoxicants, you see that the addition of this new source cumulatively with those other existing impacts are going to just be devastating and rise to that constitutional level. So we need that overarching protection in all of those places and spaces when the law just fundamentally doesn't work.
Yeah. That makes me think, with state green amendments, how does a state with a green amendment respond to the state next door doesn't have a green amendment and doesn't care and has all sorts of pollution coming up? And of course, it doesn't stay within that state. It goes into another state. How does the green amendment respond to another state's pollution that's coming into their state?
Well, it responds by being part of the Green Amendment movement and helping me get a Green Amendment in every state. Because you're right. A Green Amendment is about ensuring that when government actors within the Green Amendment state act, that they are doing so in a way that honors, respects, and protects the environmental rights of the people of their state and protects their natural resources. But they cannot reach beyond their boundaries with their state constitution, and control the actions of neighboring states. That is why we need a Green Amendment in every state. And also, there are aspects of the environment where it is in federal control. And so we need a Green Amendment to address what the federal government is doing, and also to additionally help with those cross-boundary issues. And that's why the movement is not, does not lightly, my goal is not a Green Amendment here or there. My goal is a Green Amendment in all 50 states and at the federal level as soon as possible.
How long, this might be difficult because I'm sure obviously every state is different, but from starting the process to having a green amendment, about how long does that take?
Well, every state is a little bit different, and in fact, I'm doing the count right now. But there are dozens of states where you actually could accomplish a green amendment within a 1 year time frame. That you have, for example, in New Mexico, if the New Mexico legislature, each of the legislative houses, passes the Green Amendment by majority vote once, it then goes before the people for a vote of the people. And there are multiple states where that's the case. It's a vote. Sometimes it's majority vote. Sometimes it's 2/3. Sometimes it's 3/5. But the legislature passes it once and then it goes to the people. And then there are other states where, in lieu of that, or in addition, if you can't pass that 1 year vote count threshold, if you were to have the amendment go before 2 consecutive legislatures, and each of those consecutive legislatures votes by majority vote in support of the amendment, then it goes before the people. So in those states, generally, you're talking about 3 to 4 years, because it depends where within that 2 year legislative cycle, which the legislatures are, the amendment first passes. Like if in New York, it passed in 2019, and then a new legislature came into office in 2020. And so then it passed in 2020. So that was pretty quick, or 2020, 2020, 2021. So, so it's a little bit of a mixed bag. And then there is also, in a number of states, there is the citizen initiative process. So that if it's very clear that your legislators are not going to respect the process and give the people the opportunity to vote on their own constitution by, shepherding it through the process, then in a number of states, you can do a citizen initiative where the citizens write the language, get enough votes or get enough signatures to have the amendment placed on the ballot, and then the people as a whole vote on it.
That's interesting. I'm in California. So how are we doing here in California with this?
Okay. So in California, there was, and I'm actually right this very second, I'm looking up the California process. So I'll tell you, to get a constitutional amendment in California, the legislature has to vote, each of the legislative houses, in support of the amendment by 2/3.
2/3.
And then, right. And then the amendment can go before the people for a vote. There's also constitutional convention, and there is an initiative process. So, it depends with which pathway you go. Now, last year, 2024, there was a Green Amendment proposal in the state of California. The language was not as robust as we're seeing in states like New Mexico, Michigan, and elsewhere, but it did a solid job. Okay. But it did not make it through the legislative process. So, and, again, it's a higher bar. So there has been a proposal. It has gone, the concept has been introduced in California. Now we need it to be reintroduced, right? Like next year, to try again, or there has to be a citizen initiative process. And I will tell you, I am speaking with organizations in California that are interested in pursuing that path. So if people stay tuned to CA for California, cagreenamendment.org, that is the California page on our Green Amendments for the Generations website, where people can keep up to date on what's happening in California when there is an opportunity.
Well, I'll be one.
Also, and they can see what happened last year when Assemblymember Bryan proposed it, and the information sheets and the language and some precedents, and get a little bit more information about what was proposed and what were the arguments for and against.
Okay, that's interesting. And I assume you can do that for any state that
you got it. Any state where there's an amendment,
where there's a process. Yeah.
And some states, if the process is more in the nascent stages, you'll just find a page on our national website. For other states, if you go to that moniker, the two letters of the state, greenamendment.org, you'll find a whole robust website that we've built out for that state with more resources, because there's more engagement there.
Good. You've got this all mapped out. That's great.
Well, I'm trying. I think, the biggest hurdle is that people, when they learn about this pathway, are really excited by it. They see the value of it, particularly right now in the age of Trump, watching all the environmental protections at the federal level just being washed and wiped away. And of course, it was already happening because of the Supreme Court. And they're seeing, worried about the devastating consequences and want to know, what can I do? And then they learn about the power and the value of having a state level green amendment and how empowering that is for environmental protection at the state level. And they get really excited and they want to come on board. And so it's making sure that I'm working with every community, because it's a unique body of knowledge and experience that I have. Right. So making sure that I'm working with every community, helping them become leaders and experts in their state, helping them navigate the challenges they will face, and making sure that we can find the philanthropic resources to support all of this, because like I said, at this point, 50% of the nation is in one form or another involved in the Green Amendment movement. And we've got a small operation working with all those communities. Yeah. So that's the biggest challenge, is just rising to the challenge of helping everybody who needs help.
Right. And is it a challenge? Do you perhaps, despite the devastation that we're with Trump at the federal level, is there kind of a converse to that people are seeing, oh my God, look what's happening, like I can't believe he declared an energy emergency. Like the United States pumps more oil and gas than anybody else, and where's the anyway?
No, there is no right. It's but we know everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth in one part or another is either a lie or a stretch. Right. And, the foundation of truth is so slim and so few and far between. And that's just the reality. And particularly when it comes to the environment, right? Yes. He has no semblance of care for our earth and the critically important, the importance of protecting our environment for the benefit of protecting the people, including the economy, right? Like businesses need clean water and clean air too.
Well, exactly.
But as you said, when it comes to energy, right, the United States of America is pumping out oil and gas at an astronomical rate, shipping it overseas, spewing pollution into the air, into the water, having devastating consequences. And while the United States of America is particularly now going to be doubling down on fossil fuels, guess what? The smart countries, the smart leaders are barreling forth, advancing good quality, clean, renewable energy projects. Right. And in the not too distant future, when that oil and gas has run out here in the United States of America, and it will, or it is no longer financially feasible or technologically accessible, and that will come very, very soon, then the United States of America will be truly dependent on foreign sources of energy, but it will be clean energy because we won't have any more fossil fuels here to be able to, pump out of the ground to support all the energy consumption here and or abroad. So smart politicians, smart leaders, smart business leaders are going all in on clean energy. It is only the stupid that are doubling down on dirty energy.
And it seems like that's probably happening despite Trump in the U.S. as well, with what Biden did, the IRA, and all the money that went into clean energy. I assume even the red states, a lot of money's been poured into these states to develop clean energy projects, and they don't want to back out of that. So it just doesn't make any sense.
No, it's absurd, right? It's absurd. I mean, he's ripping the rug away, from his friends in business. They're just in the clean energy business. Some of them are dirty energy and clean energy.
Right.
So he's just ripping the rug out from under them. But the other thing is, I mean, the reality is, even, aside from those kinds of subsidies, when you look at the economic benefits and values of clean energy, of wind and solar, including the job creation.
Right.
Wind and solar are far ahead of dirty fossil fuels in being, economic winners and job creators. And so just from a business perspective, it is much smarter to go in on wind and solar than to, go back to the dark ages of going all in on dirty fossil fuels.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as the green amendments go, I assume that we're not anticipating a federal amendment in the next 4 years.
No, and we weren't the thing is, we weren't anticipating that regardless of who was in office. Unfortunately, we and part of it's the politics, but a lot of it is that, when I first started this movement 10 years ago, and I would mention the idea of, constitutional protection for environmental rights, or even talk about environmental rights, people either thought they already had environmental rights, or they thought, they were stunned because they had never thought about this idea that the right to free speech, the right to bear arms, was protected more powerfully than the right to clean air or clean water. Now, I like to take at least some credit for this. Right now, it is coming into the mainstream of thought and interest, but people still don't fully understand it. And so, a lot of my work is educating people and bringing them along state by state by state. And while I'm doing that work, we're going state by state, getting green amendments, but also laying the foundation that's going to be necessary to successfully get a federal amendment. So strategically, I designed the whole movement to go states first. And while we do that work, to be laying the foundation at the same time for the federal amendment. And when the time is right, when we reach that tipping point, rest assured, I will be ready to strike with the Green Amendment, with the federal Green Amendment, and start rolling.
That'll be a big lift, though, to get a federal constitutional amendment. But that'll be so. In a best case scenario, when are we going to have a federal Green Amendment?
Okay, so I am always the positive thinker here. I can't predict when we will get it, but I do like to believe that within the next 5 to 7 years, we'll be poised to earnestly start to pursue it. We will have enough Green Amendment success at the state level, and as a result, built enough awareness and support of the values of this pathway to be poised to truly get a federal champion and start to make progress. Because at the federal level, the states need to vote in support. So we need that state support and movement politically, as well as coming from the people. And we're going to build that by doing the state by state approach first.
Yeah, I guess if you have let's just say all the states with a Green Amendment, and then you go to the federal level, that'll be a lot easier because the states we have a Green Amendment already, so why not make it?
We have a Green Amendment already, and the only thing that's happening that's problematic is in the areas where the federal government controls and has preempted state authority, the federal government's not properly protecting our environment, and we identify that as a gap and a loophole, and we want to fix it. And so they will recognize the values of the amendment, and really we will have demonstrated Green Amendments. One of the biggest arguments is the sky's going to fall economically, and there's going to be no more business, and nothing's going to happen. And we will have demonstrated again and again and again the absurdity of that assertion. All a Green Amendment does is make sure that we're protecting the quality of our environment so we can, in fact, have healthy economic development, because history has proven when you have dirty water, dirty air, devastated environments, sick workers, partially as a result of that, you do not have economic success. So you need a clean environment for economic health. And we will also have demonstrated that with a Green Amendment in place, you can pursue those good quality businesses and jobs while ensuring you are protecting your people and the environment and future generations at the same time. We truly can have it all. You just have to go about it the right way.
Right. So can you give some examples of what you just spoke of in Montana, New York, or is it Pennsylvania?
Yeah, in Pennsylvania. So, and in fact, Pennsylvania was the first Green Amendment, and that is where the movement was founded because of a legal victory I had in challenging a pro-fossil fuel law that actually was mandating, it preempted local authority and mandated that operating, drilling, and fracking well pads be allowed to be located in the heart of residential communities, right next to people's homes and hospitals and playgrounds and schools, and said to the municipalities, while you can create a residential zone that is industry free with regards to every other industry, when it comes to fracking and fossil fuels, you can't. You have to allow them to be plopped right in the middle of everything and everywhere, which of course would have devastated the quality of people's lives, their property values. The reason why anybody would want to come to portions of Pennsylvania, who wants to come and locate themselves next to a 24/7 operating fracking operation?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the amendment, the law also relieve the fracking industry of the obligation to notify people on private drinking water wells that their drinking water had become potentially contaminated by toxic fracking chemicals. Again, burdening the people with the devastating consequences of fracking, undermining their physical health, but also the economic health of the investment that they had made in their property, which for most of us is the biggest investment we make in our lives. other than education these days, right?
Right.
So we were able to, with Pennsylvania's Green Amendment, get those problematic portions of the law excised out, declared unconstitutional. And so that no longer was the local authority of local government preempted. Now they could use their zoning authority to say, look, residential zones are off limits to the industrial operations of fracking. And that is a good outcome.
Yeah.
We've also had in Pennsylvania where there was a supersaturated toxic site, saturated with trichloroethylene and other dangerous contaminants from an operating company. That was now shut down, but the site was so saturated, the pollution was seeping into the groundwater below. There was a spreading pollution plume, and neighboring communities had good reason to believe that the very serious health consequences, like brain tumors that their kids were experiencing, could be related to this site. This is a site where there were known responsible parties under the law, Johnson Matthey Corporation and Whitaker Corporation, super wealthy companies, super wealthy, that had the legal obligation to clean up the site. But the state government, rather than require those super wealthy corporations to clean up that toxic contamination, cut a sweetheart deal with a developer that said, you can develop this site with over 200 residential homes while it remains in its toxic condition, with no plan to clean it up, bringing new families and new kids to this highly toxic site, right? With devastating, you can just imagine the consequences for the health and the safety of those communities, but also their property values. Who's going to want to move in? Yeah. So we were able to, through the Green Amendment, through advocacy complemented by legal action, say to the Department of Environmental Protection, there is an existing law that requires you to require these wealthy corporations to clean up this site. And you should not, have this sweetheart deal. You should instead be requiring cleanup. And the long and the short of it is, because of the Green Amendment, at this point, the developer is still trying to press his development project, but his sweetheart deal has been wiped away. And the responsible corporations are being held accountable to put forth the money for that site to be remediated so the neighboring communities could be protected. In Montana, like I said, there was a very remote, critical ecosystem outside of Yellowstone National Park, untouched by human hands. Wildlife abounds, which was connected with the Yellowstone Park, which is an economic driver for Montana and the region, and where the health of the environment is critical to that economic vitality, right? People come from all over for that. And a permit was issued that would have allowed test well drilling out in that remote area, the building of roads and all these 24/7 noise, light, and pollution would have had devastating consequences for this remote ecosystem. Because of the amendment, that permit was challenged as saying, hey, you didn't consider the environmental consequences and then properly address them. The long and the short of it is, because of the Montana Green Amendment, that permit was declared unconstitutional. The government could have gone back and done the work to try to, reconsider. But in the end, the permit was never reissued. Why was it never reissued? It was never reissued because that project should have never gone forward, right? Right. And people had an opportunity to make that case, just like the youth in the Held v. Montana case had the opportunity to make the case that the law that was passed by the state government that prohibited government officials from considering the climate changing impacts of their decisions. Youth were able to challenge that and have that law declared unconstitutional because they had a constitutional right. And the constitutional right is above the law that the legislature sets. And we all know so many of our laws and our regulations and the permitting decisions is unfortunately part of a negotiation that happens with wealthy industry, who in no small part impact how laws are written and whether or not they actually get enforced. But if we, the people, have a constitutional right, when our government officials let us down, we can use our constitutional right to try to set it straight. So those are just a few examples.
Yeah. And that illustrates the importance of an amendment, a constitutional amendment. So you can.
That's right. Because all those actions and activities that had happened or were happening, including the failure to enforce the law. That was other than the sweetheart deal, which we did challenge and defeat on legal grounds. But all the rest of it was perfectly legal because the legislators have a right to pass laws that say clean water is water so contaminated with toxins that it will give kids cancer. And if they pass a law that says that, then guess what? When the regulatory agency gives a permit that allows an industry to spew contaminants into the water that will give kids cancer, it's legal. And we, the people, can do nothing about it except try to elect better people to office. And that, comes too late after kids have already or families have already been impacted. But if we have a Green Amendment, if we have a constitutional right that belongs to us, that is above the law. And when our government officials fail, we, the people, have an actual meaningful seat at the table and a tool that we can use to set things right, which otherwise does not exist in too many places and spaces when it comes to the environment.
So New Mexico's the next state?
Well, so we've got a lot.
Yeah,
we've got proposals just in the last couple of weeks in New Mexico, in Michigan, in Hawaii, in Nevada, just yesterday, in did I say in Washington, in Oregon, in New Jersey, in like I said, there are 19 states. They span the nation. So we have a lot, but those are states where the amendment was just proposed or re-proposed in like within the last couple of days, and more, are coming down the pike as legislative sessions kick in. But I am going, physically to New Mexico this week because there is such an incredible opportunity there with the way the constitutional process is set up. Again, majority vote of each legislative house, and then it goes to the people. And the amendment has been put forth there multiple times. So there's a lot of awareness, and we have really great legislative champions who really understand the power and importance of this pathway. So, I'm hopeful by going there, helping with the education, serving as the expert, we can make a difference this year.
That's great. So people listening to this and they live in a state where perhaps a Green Amendment has not been proposed yet. What do they do? What do people that really want to do something about this? How do they approach getting a Green Amendment started?
So if there is an amendment in their state, they should get active. We need them, right? It's a people movement. And so if people go to greenamendment.org, go to the active states page, you can see if your state's there. But if you don't see your state there and you want to be the person to get it started, what I really say is give me a call. The truth is the New Mexico movement started because one person read my book, The Green Amendment, and called me up and said, how do I make it happen? Same in Maine. One person, heard me on a podcast like your show, Tom, called me up. And so sometimes it's a legislator that calls me up and they want to propose it. Sometimes it's an organization that's well organized and well resourced, but it is not uncommon that it's just a person who calls me up and we start the work together of how do we spread the word? How do we get organizations and legislators engaged? And you'll be amazed at how quickly we can make a difference. I mean, I got that kind of phone call from two separate people in the state of Georgia within a month of each other. And so we are now having that conversation. I brought the two people together and we're starting that conversation for Georgia. And there are many states like that. So literally, I take this very personally. I really believe in this movement. And I believe that it is driven by the people, not by big greens. It's really a movement that is driven by the people. So call me up. Go to greenamendment.org. My number's there. There's a form to fill out. Truth be told, my staff sends the form right to me. And so I will see it. And if I am not the person to call you back or email you back, rest assured that the person who did get back in touch with you did it because I said, get back in touch with them. And set something up.
Well, you're doing great work, and you an example of the importance of individual activism and
Oh,
people taking charge of their environment. And I think this is great, and it's certainly necessary in the climate. That's kind of ironic in the climate we're in now with Trump. So,
yes.
Maya, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much for your time. And let's get all the states a Green Amendment, and then let's go for the federal Green Amendment. And
Thank you so much, Tom. And thank you for helping to spread the word. This is how we do it. All of us working together.
It's my pleasure. And let's make it happen.
We will.
Okay. You take care. And
You too.
good luck in New Mexico.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
There's always more we can do to stop climate change. No amount of engagement is too little, and now, more than ever, your involvement matters. To learn more and do more, visit globalwarmingisreal.com. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Tom Schoeneman. We'll see you next time on Global Warming is Real.